I'm Sarah. Teaching vocal lessons is what gets me up in the morning. At 42, I've seen my share of bright-eyed kids dreaming of the big stage, but it was Emma who brought a twist to my tale at 14, with a voice that needed work but had potential. It was her dad, Jack though, who flipped my world. "Miss Sarah, my dad's here to pick me up," Emma announced one day, her voice cutting through my thoughts like a sharp knife. I glanced up, expecting the usual parent, but there stood Jack, not what I expected. Tall with a look of someone who's seen stuff but kept standing. "Hi, I'm Jack. Emma's been going on about her lessons, you must be Sarah." His voice was straightforward, no frills. "Yeah, that's me. Emma's got talent, just needs a bit more push," I said, offering my hand. His handshake was firm, honest. "Appreciate you helping her out. I'm clueless about this stuff." "Her mom was the singer," I caught the past tense. "I'm sorry," I said, the standard response, but his nod told me he'd heard it a million times. "No worries, we're managing, aren't we, Em?" His look towards Emma was full of that silent communication only parents and kids have. Emma rolled her eyes. The universal kid signal for parents, right? But smiled. "Yeah, we're good." The conversation should have ended there, but Jack lingered. "You know, I'm trying to get her more into music, keep her busy." "Her brother too, Alex, kid's a ball of energy," I laughed. "Music's a great outlet, keeps them focused on something positive." "Exactly," Jack agreed. "Hey, ever do group lessons or something for a hyper 13-year-old who thinks he's the next big thing?" I shrugged. "I can handle 13-year-olds. Bring him by, we'll see if music or noise is his thing," Jack chuckled. And that sound did funny things to my stomach. "Deal, I'll bring him next time." "Thanks, Sarah." As they left, I shook my head, dismissing the fluttery feeling. Jack was just a dad, a widower trying to raise his kids right, nothing more. But life, as I found out, loves throwing curveballs. Jack started showing up more, sometimes with Alex, sometimes alone, under the pretext of discussing Emma's progress. We'd chat, and those chats started veering off music more often than not. One day, as autumn painted the world in hues of golden crimson, Jack turned to me, a half smile on his face. "Sarah, would you consider going out with me? Like a date?" I blinked, surprised. "A date?" "Yeah," he said, his voice firmer than his casual stance suggested. "I like talking to you, the kids like you, and I think I want to see where this could go." It was unexpected, this shift from casual chats to the possibility of something more. But looking into Jack's earnest eyes, I felt a pull, an interest I hadn't felt in a long time. "Okay, Jack, let's see where this goes," I found myself saying, a smile breaking through my usual reserve. Merging into Jack's world was like stepping onto a stage without a rehearsal. Emma was easy, music was our language. Alex, though, was a different beat, skeptical of the new woman in his dad's life, protective of his sister, and the memory of his mom. And then there was Mary, Jack's mom, a matriarch with warmth and sharpness all rolled into one. The day Jack introduced me to Alex, the kid sized me up like I was a new recruit. "So you're the music teacher," Alex said, crossing his arms, his eyes narrowed. It wasn't unfriendly, but it wasn't open arms either. "That's me, and you must be the next big thing in music from what I've heard," I shot back, trying to break the ice with a smile. He cracked a grin, the skepticism in his eyes softening a bit. "Maybe. Guess we'll see if you're any good." "Challenge accepted," I said. And from there, things started to ease into a rhythm. Alex had energy for days and a curious mind. He didn't take to music like Emma, but he respected the passion behind it. Meeting Mary was another story. She had a reputation for being tough as nails with a heart of gold hidden somewhere beneath. Walking into her house for the first time, I was greeted with a scrutinizing gaze that could make a seasoned performer sweat. "You're Sarah," she started, her voice firm but not unkind. "Good things, I hope," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She chuckled, a sound that carried both warmth and a hint of challenge. "Depends on who you ask. Sit down. Let's see if you pass the test." The afternoon unfolded with conversations that swung from blunt to deeply personal. Mary didn't hold back, asking about my intentions with her son, my thoughts on family, and my ambitions. It was like a verbal sparring match, but beneath her tough exterior, I saw glimpses of the love she had for her family. "Jack's been through a lot, the kids too. They need stability, not just another person passing through," Mary said, locking eyes with me. "I'm not here for a temporary gig, Mary. I care about them, about Jack. I'm in this," I responded, my voice carrying a conviction I felt deep in my bones. She studied me for a moment longer, then nodded, as if I'd passed some unspoken test. "Good. They could use someone like you. Just remember, kids and Jack come first, always." "Always," I echoed, understanding the weight of her words. As months turned into a year, my bond with Jack's family deepened. Emma and Alex, each in their own way, started to let me in. We had our moments, disagreements, misunderstandings, the usual family dynamics. But underneath it all was a growing sense of belonging. Jack's proposal came on a quiet evening, after a day filled with laughter and music. It was simple, no grand gestures, just him and me and a question that promised a new chapter. "Sarah, I've seen you with the kids, with my mom, with me. You become a part of us, a part we didn't even know was missing. Marry me, let's make this official," he said. Without a moment's hesitation, I said yes. The wedding was small, an intimate affair with those who mattered most. Mary, despite her tough exterior, shed a few tears, whispering, "Take care of them, Sarah. You're family now." And as I looked around at my new family, Jack, Emma, Alex, and Mary, I realized I wasn't just stepping into their lives. We were creating a new melody together, one that had its dissonances but was uniquely beautiful in its complexity. Life with Jack and the kids had settled into a sort of comfortable routine, filled with school runs, music lessons, and family dinners. But as life tends to do, it threw us a curveball that changed everything. Mary's health took a nosedive, leaving her paralyzed and in need of constant care. Jack decided the best thing was to move her into our home. It made sense, but I don't think any of us were truly prepared for the impact it would have. From the get-go, the weight of caring for Mary fell heavily on my shoulders. Jack was caught up with work, and the kids, well, they were still kids. I didn't mind at first, Mary was family after all. But as time went on, the strain began to show. One particularly tough day, after a grueling session of trying to get Mary comfortable and dealing with a mountain of household chores, I sat down at the kitchen table, feeling utterly defeated. Mary had been particularly difficult, refusing to eat or take her medication, and Jack had been no help, locked away in his office. I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't hear Jack come in. He stood there watching me, an unreadable expression on his face. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, his voice void of the warmth it once held. I braced myself, knowing this conversation wouldn't be good. "What's up?" "It's about my mom and you. You seem off lately, not handling things as well as you used to." I stared at him, incredulous. "Off, Jack? I'm doing everything I can. I'm tired, I'm stressed. I'm trying to be there for your mom, for the kids, for you, and it's never enough." He took a step back as if my words were physical blows. "I know you're trying, but it's not just about effort, Sarah. It's about results, and right now, we're not seeing them. His words were like a slap in the face. Results. As if I was just another employee failing to meet my targets. Not his wife struggling to keep our family together. Years rolled by, each one more challenging than the last. Mary's condition didn't improve, and my relationship with Jack and the kids, especially as they grew into adults, became more strained. The once vibrant connection I shared with Emma and Alex, built on music and mutual respect, faded into polite indifference. Then, Mary passed away. It was a difficult time for all of us, a period marked by grief and reflection. I thought naively that maybe this would bring us closer, that shared sorrow would mend the cracks in our family, but I was wrong. After the funeral, things took a turn for the worse. Jack's demeanor changed overnight. The man who once looked at me with love and gratitude, now regarded me with disdain. "You're just not the same anymore, Sarah," Jack snapped one evening, his words laced with bitterness that caught me off guard. "You've let yourself go, you're old, you're ugly, I'm tired of you." I stood there shocked. His harsh words felt like a physical blow, leaving me speechless and hurt. "Jack, how can you say that after everything?" I started, but he cut me off. "Everything? You mean taking care of my kids and my mother? That was your job, Sarah. I tolerated you because you did the chores, nothing more." His words were like a knife, twisting deeper with each syllable. And the kids, now adults, weren't any better. Emma, once my closest ally, turned cold. "You really have no one but us, and you're pushing even us away. You're just a lonely, useless woman," she said, her voice void of the warmth that once held. Alex was no kinder, seizing every opportunity to belittle me. "You should be grateful we even let you stay here," he sneered whenever he passed me in the hall. I couldn't believe these were the same people I had loved and cared for, had considered my family. The transformation was stark, their contempt for me a constant reminder of how much had changed. It wasn't just the emotional toll, my body began to betray me too. My legs, once strong and sure, now ached with a pain that made every step a chore. The doctor's words were clinical, detached, but they hit hard. "It's chronic," he said, scribbling something on his pad. "You'll need to manage it. Adjust your activities." Adjust my activities. As if my life wasn't already a series of adjustments. Concessions to a family that saw me as nothing more than a burden. One day, as I struggled to stand after a long bout of cleaning, Jack walked in, his eyes scanning the room, always looking for something to criticize. "What's wrong with you now?" he asked, his voice dripping with impatience. I tried to steady myself, to push past the pain. "My legs," I started. "They've been really bad today." The doctor said. He cut me off with a wave of his hand, a dismissive gesture that felt like a slap. "Always something with you, isn't it? Can't even rely on you to do the basic chores around here without making a big deal out of it." Teaching at the private school, my passion and my escape became impossible. Jack's reaction to my diagnosis was as cold as ice. "So what? You're just going to sit around all day now? Great. And another mouth to feed without any use," he sneered. The day I told him about my condition, his words cut deeper than the sharp pain in my legs. I wanted to scream, to tell him how much he was hurting me, but I knew it would only make things worse. So I bit back the pain and the tears, trying to find some way to navigate this new reality. Living in Jack's house became a daily reminder of my dependence. I was reduced to limping around, trying to keep the house in order, cooking meals that were often met with criticism or indifference. The pain was constant, a sharp reminder of my predicament, but I pushed through, terrified of what would happen if I stopped. Jack and the kids lived as if nothing had changed, as if my struggles were just a minor inconvenience to their lives. The inheritance from Mary's passing seemed to ignite a spending spree. New gadgets, clothes, jewelry, all flaunted in front of me, as if to underscore my exclusion from their lives. "You should be grateful we're keeping you around," Jack would say, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Without us, you'd be on the street, remember that." Emma and Alex took their cues from their father, treating me more like an unwanted servant than a stepmother. "Don't forget to wash my new jeans. Sarah wouldn't want them ruined like you ruin everything else." Emma would toss over her shoulder, her words sharp as knives. Alex was no better. "Make sure dinner's on time tonight. We've got places to be, and we can't wait around for you to limp around the kitchen," he'd say, his disdain barely veiled. I harbored fantasies of leaving, of finding some way to reclaim my independence and dignity. But the reality was harsh. With no income, no savings, and a body that betrayed me at every turn, I was stuck. My dreams of escape seemed just that, dreams, distant and unattainable. In the midst of my lowest point, feeling trapped and useless, I stumbled upon something that sparked a flicker of hope in me. It was during one of those long sleepless nights scrolling aimlessly through the internet on my old, barely functioning laptop. I found a forum for vocal teachers, giving online lessons. The idea struck me like a lightning bolt. The next day, with the house empty and my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear, I set up a makeshift studio in the corner of my room. I wasn't sure if anyone would be interested, but I had to try. To my astonishment, inquiries started coming in. People were interested in learning from me, despite my physical limitations. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt valued for my skills and knowledge. Jack and the kids noticed the change in me but didn't know the cause. "What's got into you?" Jack asked one evening, his tone suspicious as he caught me humming while preparing dinner. "Just feeling a bit better today," I replied, hiding the fear that he would disapprove, or worse, try to stop me. He snorted, dismissing my response. "Well, don't get too happy, you've still got your duties around here." I nodded, my heart sinking, but I didn't let his words deter me. The hours I spent teaching online became my sanctuary, a place where I could be myself, share my love for music and forget, even if just for a little while, the pain and humiliation I endured daily. I invested the little money I made from teaching into better equipment, slowly but surely building my online presence. The physical pain was still there, a constant reminder of my limitations. But when I was teaching, it receded into the background, overshadowed by the joy of connecting with my students. As the months went by, I took a moment to look at the numbers, something I had been avoiding, afraid to jinx it. But there it was, clear as day on my screen. I was making money, real money, more than I ever made teaching at the private school, more than I ever thought possible from the confines of this oppressive house, and shockingly, more than Jack made with his so-called prestigious job. I remember sitting there, staring at the figures, a mix of disbelief and triumph washing over me. For so long, I had felt like a burden, a financial leech in Jack's eyes, but here I was, earning my own way. And not just scraping by, but actually doing better than him. For a moment, I let myself bask in the success, allowing the numbers to speak for themselves. I was doing this. I was making it happen despite everything that had been thrown my way. It was a silent victory, one I couldn't share with anyone in the house, but it was mine all the same. The betrayal that came was not just a single moment of cruelty, but a culmination of years of disregard and contempt crystallized into one devastating dinner conversation. There we were, sitting around the table, me serving them as I always did, when Jack decided to drop his bombshell with a smirk that I had come to love. "I got promoted at work," he started, and for a brief, foolish moment, I thought maybe this was good news, something positive for once. But then he continued. "So I bought a new house, a better one fitting for my status. That's when the air around me grew cold. My hand stilled the plate I was holding, nearly slipping from my grasp. Before I could even muster a congratulations, he landed his cruel blow. "And I'll be moving there with the kids, not you. You're not coming." His words were like a slap, but the mocking laugh that followed was a knife to the heart. "I mean, come on, Sarah, did you really think you'd fit in an old limp like you?" "No, it's time I found someone younger, more suitable," he continued. The laughter that erupted from Emma cut even deeper. "Yeah, and guess what? This old house sold. Enjoy the streets, Sarah." I stood there frozen as he slid the divorce papers across the table. The audacity, the sheer coldness of it all, was staggering. Yet as I looked at those papers, something within me refused to break. I didn't cry, didn't plead. I simply signed them, each stroke of my name a silent vow to myself. When morning came, I was ready. Jack and the kids watched with a mix of surprise and that familiar contempt as I howled my bags to the door. Their parting words were mean to wound, to kick me when I was down. "Hope you like the flop houses, Sarah." Jack sneered, a cruel smile playing on his lips. But I walked out of that house with my head held high, the weight of their insults falling away with each step I took. For the first time in years I felt a sense of freedom, a clarity that had been missing from my life. Settling into my new rented apartment was like breathing fresh air for the first time in years. It was my space, my sanctuary, where I could dive into my online vocal teaching without looking over my shoulder. Hearing from friends, I found out Jack had moved into that fancy new house with the kids, true to form. Instead of being smart with the money from the old house, they blew it on all sorts of nonsense. Typical. That's when I decided to play my hand. Over the years, I'd saved voicemails and recorded moments of their verbal lashings, a dark library of the abuse I suffered. Without a second thought, I sent them off to Jack's boss. It felt like releasing doves into a storm, but these birds carried grenades. The call I got from Jack after was music to my ears, but not the kind I usually taught. "Sarah, what have you done?" he screamed into the phone, his voice a mix of rage and panic. "They're demoting me, cutting my salary, how could you?" In the background, I could hear Emma and Alex, their voices shrill, hurling insults my way. But their words felt distant, inconsequential. "Oh, Jack," I said, a laugh bubbling up. "Looks like you're the one who might end up without a roof over your head. Meanwhile, I'm here thinking about buying my own place, how the tables have turned." The silence that followed was sweet, filled with their disbelief and shock. Then Jack, ever the beggar now, started his plea. "Sarah, please, you have to help us, we could lose the house, the kids. Think about the kids. We'll take you back, I swear. Swear we'll do anything." Hearing them grovel, offering to take me back as if they were doing me a favor, was the cherry on top. "Take me back to be your maid again? No thanks. I've got better things to do." Hanging up the phone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. A final closure to a chapter of my life that had brought me nothing but pain. They were desperate, flailing in the mess they'd made, and for once I wasn't there to clean it up. Through the grapevine, friends let slip that Jack, along with Emma and Alex, had been evicted. Couldn't keep up with the mortgage, they said. Now they were crammed into some small apartment, the kids juggling jobs to make ends meet. The twist of fate wasn't lost on me. After everything they put me through, there was a bitter taste of justice in the air. "Can you believe it?" I mused aloud during a call with one of my closest friends from the teaching community, Lena. Jack and the kids scrambling to keep a roof over their heads after all that talk about me ending up in a flop house. Lena's laugh crackled through the phone. "Karma's a real kicker, ain't it? You, on the other hand, are living proof that what goes around comes around. You're doing amazing. Then came the opportunity of a lifetime. A well-known music school reached out, having heard of my teaching success. They offered me a position, not just as a teacher, but as a coordinator for their online program. It was more than a job. It was recognition, a chance to influence and inspire on a scale I had never imagined. As I sat down to sign the contract, a wave of gratitude washed over me. To think, not so long ago, I was convinced my life had crumbled beyond repair. And now here I was, signing a contract that was not just a job offer but a symbol of my journey from darkness into light. The celebration that night was simple, just me and a few close friends I had made along the way, including Lena, who had quickly become a pillar of support and friendship. As we raised our glasses in a toast, Lena leaned over and whispered, "You're an inspiration, Sarah. You've turned your life into a symphony of success." Her words struck a chord, and I found myself overwhelmed with emotion. "Thank you, Lena. It's been quite the journey, but you know what? I wouldn't change a thing. The hardships, the pain, it all led me here, to this moment, to a life I can be proud of." As the night wore on, filled with music and laughter, I realized that this was more than just a new chapter. It was a whole new book, a story of triumph over adversity, of finding harmony in the chaos.
I stared at the email on Greg's computer, my heart pounding in my chest. The words on the screen seemed to blur together, but one phrase stood out like a neon sign: financial deceit. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the exchange between Greg and his sister, Lydia. A sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. "Greg," I called out, my voice wavering. "Can you come here for a minute?" He appeared in the doorway, his brow furrowed. "What's wrong, Char?" I swiveled the laptop towards him, the incriminating email displayed prominently. "Care to explain this?" Greg's face paled as he scanned the contents. "It's not what you think," he stammered, running a hand through his thinning hair. "This is for the family." I let out a bitter laugh. "For the family? Or for Lydia's latest scheme?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "How could you do this behind my back, Greg? After everything we've built together?" He held up his hands defensively. "Char, you know how Lydia gets. She was in a tight spot, and I couldn't just turn my back on her. So you decided to betray my trust instead?" I shook my head, feeling the sting of tears in my eyes. "How much did you give her this time?" Greg averted his gaze, his jaw clenched. 70,000. The air seemed to leave my lungs. $70,000, our hard-earned savings, meant for our future and our daughter Ellie's education. All funneled into Lydia's bottomless pit of financial irresponsibility. "Mom? Dad? What's going on?" Ellie's voice startled me, and I turned to see her standing in the hallway, her backpack slung over one shoulder. At 20 years old, she was wise beyond her years, and I could see the concern etched on her face. "It's nothing, honey," Greg said, forcing a smile. "Just a little family misunderstanding." I opened my mouth to protest, but the doorbell rang, cutting me off. Greg shot me a warning look before heading to answer it. Moments later, Lydia breezed into the room, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer clothes a stark contrast to the turmoil she was causing. "Charlotte, darling," she exclaimed, air-kissing my cheek. "I'm so glad you're both here. We have a bit of a situation." I tensed, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "You don't say." Lydia's gaze flickered between Greg and me, her perfectly painted lips curling into a smirk. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is a family matter, after all." As she launched into her latest sob story, I felt a surge of determination rise within me. I had been complacent for too long, allowing Greg and Lydia's manipulations to dictate the course of our lives. But not anymore. This time, I would stand my ground and protect what mattered most, my family's future and my own sense of self-worth. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. Lydia's words hung in the air like a noxious cloud, seeping into every corner of the room. "This is for Greg's future, too," she insisted, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the arm of the sofa. I fought the urge to roll my eyes. Of course, she would try to spin this as some noble act, a sacrifice for the greater good of the family. But I knew better. This was just another one of her schemes, and Greg had fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. "Stop with the lies, Lydia," I said, my voice low and steady. "I know about the emails, the money." Ellie shifted uncomfortably beside me, her gaze darting between Greg and me. I could see the confusion and hurt etched on her face, and my heart ached for her. She didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire of this mess. Greg cleared his throat, his eyes pleading with me to let it go. "Char, let's not do this in front of Ellie." "No," I said firmly. "She deserves to know the truth." I turned to my daughter, taking her hand in mine. "Your father has been funneling money from our joint savings account to cover Lydia's gambling debts." Ellie's eyes widened, and she looked at Greg in disbelief. "Is this true?" Greg opened his mouth, but Lydia cut him off. "It's not as simple as that, Ellie," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I made some poor choices, yes, but your father was only trying to help me get back on my feet." I scoffed. "By taking $70,000 from our family's future? Without even consulting me?" Lydia waved a dismissive hand. Details. The important thing is that we're family, and family looks out for each other." I could feel my blood boiling, my carefully cultivated composure cracking. "Family doesn't manipulate and lie to each other," I spat. "Family doesn't betray each other's trust for their own selfish gain." Greg flinched at my words, but Lydia remained unfazed. "You're being dramatic, Charlotte," she said, her lips curling into a condescending smile. "Greg was just trying to do the right thing." "The right thing," I echoed, my voice rising. "The right thing would have been to come clean with me from the start. The right thing would have been to let you face the consequences of your actions instead of enabling you." Lydia's eyes narrowed, and for a moment her mask of false concern slipped, revealing the entitled, manipulative woman beneath. "You're one to talk about consequences," she hissed. "You've been living a life of luxury off Greg's hard work for years." I recoiled as if she had slapped me. "How dare you?" I sputtered. "I've been the one holding this family together, working my ass off to provide for us, while Greg was off chasing get-rich-quick schemes with you." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Greg looked stricken, his face ashen, while Ellie stared at her father with a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. Lydia, however, simply shrugged. "Whatever helps you sleep at night, dear sister-in-law," she said, rising to her feet. "Just remember, blood is thicker than water, and you'll need us more than you think." With that parting shot, she sauntered out of the room, leaving a trail of tension and betrayal in her wake. I sank back onto the couch, suddenly drained. Greg reached out to me, but I flinched away from his touch. "Char, please," he pleaded. "Let me explain." But I had heard enough explanations, enough excuses. The truth was laid bare before me, and it was a bitter pill to swallow. My husband, the man I had trusted with my heart and my future, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And as I looked into Ellie's eyes, brimming with unshed tears, I knew that I couldn't let this stand. It was time to take control of my life, to protect what mattered most. The gloves were off, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine, with or without Greg by my side. The silence that followed Lydia's departure was deafening, the weight of her parting words hanging heavy in the air. I could feel the anger and hurt swirling within me, threatening to boil over. "How could you betray our trust like this, Greg?" I asked, my voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "Our future? Ellie's future?" Greg ran a hand over his face, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "It's complicated, Char," he said, his tone pleading. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." I let out a bitter laugh. "The pressure? From your manipulative sister, you mean?" I shook my head in disbelief. "That's no excuse, Greg. We're supposed to be partners, a team. But instead, you've been lying to me, stealing from our family's future to enable Lydia's reckless behavior." Ellie shifted uncomfortably beside me, her eyes downcast. I could only imagine the turmoil she must be feeling, caught in the crossfire of her parents' crumbling marriage. Greg's gaze flickered to our daughter, and I could see the guilt etched on his face. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said, his voice strained. "Lydia just kept needing more and more, and I couldn't turn my back on her. She's family." "And what am I, Greg?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Just some inconvenient obstacle in your twisted idea of family loyalty?" He flinched at my words, but I pressed on, the dam of emotions finally bursting forth. I've been the one holding this family together, working my ass off to provide for us while you were off chasing get-rich-quick schemes with Lydia. And this is how you repay me? By betraying my trust, jeopardizing our daughter's future? Greg opened his mouth to respond, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. Save it, I said, my voice low and steady. I'm done with the excuses, the lies. You've made your choice, Greg, and it's clear where your loyalties lie. I turned to Ellie, my heart aching at the sight of her distress. Honey, I'm so sorry you've been caught up in this mess, I said, taking her hand in mine. But I promise you, I'm going to make things right, no matter what it takes. Ellie nodded, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I know, Mom, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I trust you. Those simple words were like a balm to my wounded soul, reminding me of what truly mattered, the love and trust of my daughter, the one person who had stood by me through it all. I squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her unwavering support. Then I turned back to Greg, my resolve hardening like steel. You have one chance to come clean, Greg, I said, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. Tell me everything, every scheme, every lie, every penny you've funneled to Lydia, and maybe, just maybe, we can start to rebuild some semblance of trust. Greg's eyes widened, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of hope in his gaze. But then his expression hardened, and he shook his head. I can't, he said, his voice barely audible. Lydia, she needs me. In that moment, I knew our marriage was well and truly over. The man I had loved, the partner I had trusted, was gone, replaced by a shell of a person, trapped in Lydia's web of manipulation and deceit. But as I looked at Ellie, her hands still clasped in mine, I knew that I had to be strong, for her sake and for my own. The storm was brewing, and I was ready to weather it, no matter the cost. I stared at the computer screen, my eyes burning from the countless hours spent poring over financial records and email trails. The evidence was damning, a twisted web of deceit spun by Greg and Lydia that threatened to unravel everything I had worked so hard to build. A soft knock on the door jolted me from my thoughts. Come in, I called out, quickly minimizing the windows on my screen. Mariana, my trusted colleague and mentor, stepped into the office, her warm smile a welcome respite from the storm raging within me. Charlotte, you look like you could use a break, she said, her voice laced with concern. I let out a weary sigh, running a hand through my disheveled hair. I'm fine, Mariana, just trying to make sense of this mess. Her brow furrowed as she took in my haggard appearance. This is about more than work, isn't it? She asked gently. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much to reveal. But Mariana had been a constant source of wisdom and support throughout my career, and I knew I could trust her. It's Greg, I confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. He's been funneling money to his sister, Lydia, behind my back. Thousands of dollars, gone, just to enable her reckless behavior. Mariana's eyes widened, and she sank into the chair across from me. Oh, Charlotte, she murmured, her voice heavy with sympathy. I'm so sorry. I shook my head, blinking back tears of frustration. I've just been so blind, Mariana. How could I not see what was happening right under my nose? She reached across the desk, her warm hand covering mine in a comforting gesture. You're not to blame, dear, she said firmly. The fault lies with those who betrayed your trust. Her words struck a chord within me, and I felt a flicker of resolve ignite in my chest. She was right. I was the victim here, not the perpetrator. Greg and Lydia had made their choices, and it was time for me to make mine. What if I can't piece it all back together, Mariana? I asked, my voice trembling with uncertainty. What if the damage is too deep, too irreparable? Mariana's gaze was steady, her eyes shining with a wisdom born of experience. Charlotte, you are stronger than you think, she said, her voice gentle but unwavering. Don't let them drag you down. You have the power to rise above this, to forge your own path. Her words resonated within me, igniting a flame of determination that burned away the doubt and fear that had been weighing me down. I was Charlotte Emerson, a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had built a successful career and a loving family through sheer grit and resilience, and I would not let Greg and Lydia's betrayal define me. As if sensing my newfound resolve, Mariana gave my hand a gentle squeeze. Whatever you decide, know that you have my support, she said, a warm smile spreading across her face. You are not alone in this. I returned her smile, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Thank you, Mariana," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I'd do without you." She waved a dismissive hand, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Nonsense, my dear. You'd find a way to conquer the world, with or without me." Her words ignited a spark of laughter within me, and for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but with allies like Mariana by my side, I knew I had the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As Mariana rose to leave, I felt a newfound sense of clarity wash over me. Greg had made his choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. No more excuses, no more lies. I would uncover the truth, no matter how painful, and chart my own course forward. The facade had crumbled, and I was ready to embrace the reality that lay beneath. A reality where I, Charlotte Emerson, was the master of my own destiny. The weight of the evidence in my hands felt like a lead anchor, dragging me deeper into the murky depths of betrayal. But I knew I couldn't turn back now. Not when the truth was finally within my grasp. "Charlotte, what's going on?" Margaret's voice cut through the tension, her brow furrowed with concern. "This infighting is tearing us apart." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. "Ron, Margaret, you need to know what Greg and Lydia have done." Greg's eyes widened, and he opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing him. This was my moment, my chance to lay bare the tangled web of lies that had ensnared our family. "For years, Greg has been funneling money from our joint savings to cover Lydia's debts," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor of anger coursing through me. "Thousands upon thousands of dollars siphoned away without my knowledge or consent." Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, while Ron's expression hardened into a mask of stoic disapproval. "Is this true?" he demanded, his gaze boring into Greg and Lydia. Lydia, ever the master manipulator, was the first to respond. "Daddy, you know how these things can spiral out of control," she simpered, her eyes brimming with crocodile tears. "I made some poor choices, but Greg was only trying to help me get back on my feet." I scoffed, shaking my head in disbelief. "Don't buy into her lies, Ron," I said, my voice laced with contempt. "She's been playing you both for fools, using Greg's misguided sense of loyalty to bleed us dry." From the corner of my eye, I saw Greg flinch, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He knew the jig was up, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of the truth. "Charlotte's right," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "I should have been honest from the start, but Lydia, she just kept needing more and more." Lydia's mask of innocence slipped, her eyes narrowing into slits of fury. "You spineless worm," she hissed, rounding on Greg. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" The room descended into chaos, with Margaret sobbing and Ron bellowing for order. In the midst of the pandemonium, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The storm had finally broken, and the truth lay bare before us all. "Enough!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the din like a knife. "This ends now, Lydia." All eyes turned to me, and I could feel the weight of their collective gaze pressing down upon me. But I refused to falter, drawing strength from the knowledge that I held the power in my hands. "You have one chance to take responsibility for your actions," I said, my voice low and steady. "Admit to what you've done, and we can move forward as a family." Lydia's lips curled into a sneer, her eyes glinting with defiance. "Or what, Charlotte? You'll go running to the authorities like a scared little girl?" I met her gaze unflinchingly, my resolve unwavering. "Or I expose everything to our extended family and community," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "Every lie, every scheme, every penny you've bled from us, all laid bare for the world to see." A hush fell over the room, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Greg's parents looked stunned, their faces pale with shock and dismay. Lydia, however, simply laughed, a bitter, mocking sound that sent a chill down my spine. "You'll regret this, Charlotte," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "The family will never forgive you." But as I looked around the room, taking in the faces of those I loved most, I knew that I had already won. The truth was out, and Lydia's grip on our lives was slipping. "Better to be true and alone than entangled in falsehood with company," I said, my voice ringing with conviction. In that moment, I knew that the path ahead would be arduous, fraught with pain and heartbreak. But I was ready to face the consequences of my actions, ready to forge a new path forward, free from the shackles of manipulation and deceit. The showdown had begun, and I was determined to emerge victorious, no matter the cost. Lydia's words hung in the air like a poisonous cloud, her threat reverberating through the room. "You'll regret this, Charlotte. The family will never forgive you." I met her gaze unflinchingly, my resolve hardening like steel. "Better to be true and alone than entangled in falsehood with company," I said, my voice ringing with conviction. Greg's parents exchanged a troubled glance, their faces etched with conflicting emotions. I could see the struggle playing out behind their eyes, the desire to believe their children warring with the stark reality of the truth laid bare before them. Lydia, sensing their wavering loyalty, turned on the waterworks, her eyes brimming with crocodile tears. "Mommy, Daddy, please," she simpered, her voice thick with false anguish. "You know, I would never intentionally hurt this family." But her manipulations fell on deaf ears. The evidence I had presented was damning, a mountain of financial records and email trails that left no room for doubt or excuses. Ron was the first to break the tense silence, his voice gruff with barely contained anger. "Enough of this nonsense," he growled, fixing Lydia with a steely glare. "Your sister-in-law has presented irrefutable proof of your misdeeds. It's time to face the consequences." Lydia's jaw dropped, her carefully cultivated mask of innocence shattering into 1,000 pieces. But you're supposed to be on my side," she sputtered, her eyes darting between her parents in disbelief. Margaret, her face pale and drawn, reached out to grasp her husband's hand. "We're on the side of truth, Lydia," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "And the truth is, you've betrayed this family's trust in the most egregious way." A hush fell over the room as the weight of Margaret's words sank in. Greg, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, seemed to shrink into himself, his shoulders slumped in defeat. But Lydia was not one to go down without a fight. "This is all her doing," she spat, rounding on me with a venomous glare. "She's turned you against your own flesh and blood." I opened my mouth to respond, but Mariana beat me to it, her voice ringing out like a clarion call. "That's enough, Lydia," she said, her tone brooking no argument. "The only person responsible for this mess is you." Mariana's unwavering support was like a balm to my soul, and I felt a surge of gratitude towards my mentor and friend. She had been by my side from the beginning, offering wisdom and guidance when I needed it most. As if sensing my renewed strength, Lydia's bravado faltered, her eyes darting towards the door. But before she could make a move, Ron stepped forward, his expression steely. "You're cut off, Lydia," he said, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. "No more handouts, no more enabling. It's time you faced the consequences of your actions." Lydia's face contorted with rage, her carefully cultivated facade crumbling into a twisted mask of fury. "You'll regret this," she snarled, her eyes wild and unhinged. "All of you." But her threats rang hollow, her power over the family finally broken. As she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end the truth had prevailed. And as I looked around at the faces of those who had stood by me, Mariana, Ellie, even Greg's parents, I knew that I was not alone. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Lydia's reign of terror was over, and I was ready to take control of my life once more. As the dust settled, I turned to Ellie, my heart swelling with pride at the strength and resilience she had shown throughout this ordeal. "It's going to be okay, honey," I said, pulling her into a tight embrace. "We're going to get through this, together." Ellie nodded, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and admiration. "I know, Mom," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've shown me what it means to be truly strong." In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I had the courage and determination to face them head-on. With the unwavering support of my daughter and my newfound allies, I was ready to forge a new path, one free from the shackles of manipulation and deceit. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. And as I looked towards the future, I felt a sense of purpose and resolve that I hadn't felt in years. It was time to take control of my destiny, once and for all. The silence that followed Lydia's dramatic exit was deafening, the weight of her actions hanging heavy in the air. But as I looked around at the faces of those who had stood by me, Mariana, Ellie, even Greg's parents, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The storm had passed, and in its wake, a newfound sense of peace and resolve had taken root. "Mom?" Ellie's voice broke the stillness, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and admiration. "I'm so proud of you. You've shown me what it means to be truly strong." Her words struck a chord deep within me, and I felt a surge of emotion welling up in my chest. Through all the turmoil and heartbreak, Ellie had been my constant, a beacon of love and support that had guided me through the darkest of times. "Ellie," I said, pulling her into a tight embrace, "anything I do for us. Love is our true wealth, and as long as we have that, we'll be okay." She nodded, her arms tightening around me, and in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, as a united front. A soft cough drew my attention back to the others in the room, and I turned to see Greg hovering uncertainly in the doorway. His eyes were downcast, his shoulders slumped in defeat, and for a fleeting moment I felt a pang of pity for the man I had once loved. "Char," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I know I've made mistakes, unforgivable mistakes, but please, let me try to make things right." I studied him for a long moment, weighing his words against the weight of his betrayal. Part of me yearned for the easy path, the chance to salvage what was left of our marriage and move on with our lives. But a deeper, more primal part of me knew that it was too late for reconciliation. The trust had been shattered, the foundation of our relationship irreparably damaged by his lies and deceit. "I'm sorry, Greg," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor of emotion coursing through me. "But it's too late for apologies. You made your choice when you chose to stand by Lydia, even after everything she put us through." He flinched as if I had struck him, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Please, Char," he pleaded, taking a step towards me. "I'll do anything, just give me another chance." But I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "No, Greg," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "It's over. I can't keep living in the shadow of your lies, constantly wondering when the next betrayal will come." Ellie shifted beside me, her hand finding mine and giving it a gentle squeeze. Her silent support was all the strength I needed to forge ahead, to sever the ties that had bound me to a life of manipulation and deceit. "It's time for me to take control of my life," I said, my gaze sweeping over Greg and his parents, who had remained silent witnesses to our exchange. "I'm done being a victim. It's done being taken for granted and underappreciated." Greg opened his mouth as if to protest, but I cut him off with a shake of my head. "This is my moment, Greg," I said, my voice laced with a newfound sense of determination. "My chance to forge a new path, one free from the shackles of your sister's toxic influence." A flicker of resignation passed over his features, and he nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I understand," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I just hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday." I said nothing, my silence speaking volumes. Forgiveness was a luxury I couldn't afford, not when the wounds of his betrayal were still so raw and fresh. As Greg turned and left, his footsteps echoing hollowly in the stillness, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The storm had passed, and in its wake, a newfound sense of clarity had taken root. It was time to start building a new chapter, one brick at a time. With Ellie by my side and the unwavering support of my newfound allies, I knew that I had the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The road would be long and arduous, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope, a beacon of light cutting through the darkness that had threatened to consume me. As I looked around at the familiar surroundings of my home, I felt a sense of purpose and determination wash over me. This was my sanctuary, my safe haven, and I was ready to reclaim it as my own. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. And as I turned to face the future, I knew that I would emerge stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. It was time to take control of my destiny, once and for all. The gentle hum of conversation and laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the tumultuous events that had preceded this moment. As I surveyed the crowd gathered for the community celebration, I couldn't help but marvel at the transformation that had taken place, not just in my own life, but in the lives of those around me. "Look at you now, Charlotte." Mariana's voice broke through my reverie, her warm smile a familiar comfort. You've come such a long way." I returned her smile, feeling a swell of gratitude for the unwavering support she had shown me throughout this journey. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mariana," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You were there for me when I needed it most." She waved a dismissive hand, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Nonsense, my dear. You had the strength within you all along. I merely helped you see it." As I looked around at the familiar faces mingling and chatting, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. These were the people who had stood by me, offering their support and encouragement when the world seemed to be crumbling around me. "Mom?" Ellie's voice drew my attention, and I turned to see her beaming at me, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and affection. "We're going to be just fine, aren't we?" I pulled her into a tight embrace, savoring the moment of connection with my daughter, the one constant in a world that had been turned upside down. "Yes, honey," I murmured, my voice thick with emotion. "We're going to be more than fine." As I held her close, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought us to this point. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the struggle to reclaim control of my life. It had all been worth it, if only to reach this moment of clarity and peace. "Charlotte!" a voice called out, and I turned to see Margaret and Ron making their way towards us, their faces etched with genuine warmth and affection. "We're so proud of you, dear," Margaret said, pulling me into a gentle embrace. "You've shown such strength and resilience through all of this." Ron nodded in agreement, his eyes shining with a mixture of admiration and regret. "We should have seen the truth sooner," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "But you never gave up, and for that, you have our eternal gratitude." I felt a lump form in my throat, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support from these two people who had once been so deeply entangled in Lydia's web of deceit. "Thank you," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "It means more than you know." As the evening wore on, I found myself surrounded by a network of allies and supporters, colleagues, friends, and even members of the community who had rallied behind me in my darkest hour. Their words of encouragement and admiration buoyed my spirits, reminding me of the incredible journey I had undertaken and the obstacles I had overcome. And through it all, Ellie remained by my side, a constant source of strength and inspiration. Her unwavering belief in me had been the fuel that kept me going, even when the path ahead seemed shrouded in darkness. As the celebration drew to a close, I found myself standing on the periphery, watching as the crowd dispersed and the lights dimmed. A sense of peace washed over me, a feeling of contentment and closure that I hadn't experienced in years. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt truly ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. With the support of my newfound allies and the love of my daughter, I knew that I had the strength and resilience to forge a new path, one built on the foundations of truth, integrity, and self-worth. As I turned to leave, Mariana's words echoed in my mind. "Look at you now, Charlotte. You've come such a long way." And in that moment, I knew that she was right. I had come a long way, further than I could have ever imagined. But the journey was far from over, and with each step forward, I felt a newfound sense of purpose and determination. The echoes of betrayal had faded, replaced by the resounding chorus of hope and possibility. And as I looked towards the horizon, I knew that the best was yet to come.
I stepped off the plane from Italy with a heart full of stories and a camera roll bursting with content for my travel vlog. 2 weeks of exploring hidden trattorias and ancient villages had given me exactly what I needed for my next series. My name is Avery, and until today, I thought I had finally figured out how to balance my dream job with my marriage. The first sign something was wrong came when Eric didn't answer my texts after I landed. Usually, he'd send at least a quick, "welcome back," or ask when to pick me up. Instead, I got radio silence and had to grab an Uber home. No big deal, I told myself. He was probably stuck in a meeting or something. The second red flag hit me when I saw his mother's car in our driveway. "Hello?" I called out, dragging my suitcase through the front door. The house felt different somehow, tense, like the air before a storm. I found them sitting in our living room like they were waiting for a funeral to start. Eric perched on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped together so tight his knuckles were white. His mother Lorraine sat next to him, ramrod straight in her designer pantsuit, lips pressed into that thin line I'd grown to hate over the years. "Welcome home, dear," Lorraine said, in that syrupy voice that always meant trouble was coming. Eric wouldn't look at me. "We need to talk, Avery." My stomach dropped. I'd seen enough movies to know nothing good ever followed those words. "What's going on?" "Your lifestyle," Lorraine began, gesturing vaguely at my travel-worn appearance. "It's becoming concerning." I let out a laugh that probably sounded more nervous than I intended. "My lifestyle? You mean my job? The one that's finally taking off?" "That's exactly what we mean." Eric finally looked up, and something in his eyes made me take a step back. "This isn't sustainable, Avery. The constant traveling, the irregular income, living out of a suitcase. It's not how a marriage is supposed to work." "Not how a marriage is supposed to work?" I echoed, my voice rising. "My channel just hit 500,000 subscribers. I'm making more now than I did in corporate marketing." Lorraine cleared her throat. "Money isn't everything, dear. What about starting a family? Putting down roots?" "We agreed to wait on kids," I said to Eric, ignoring his mother. "You said you supported this." "I supported a hobby," he replied, standing up. "But this has gone too far. I need stability, Avery. A real wife, not someone who's gone more than she's home." The word "real" hit me like a slap. I noticed then that there were papers on the coffee table. Legal papers. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. "An ultimatum," Eric said quietly. "Either you give up the vlog and commit to building a real life here with me, or what?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. "Or we end this now, before we waste any more time." I picked up the papers with trembling hands. Divorce papers, already filled out with everything except my signature. "You did this while I was gone?" I looked between them, reality crashing down around me. "You waited until I was out of the country to plan this?" "We knew you wouldn't be reasonable if we tried to discuss it normally," Lorraine said, as if that made it better. I stood there, still in my travel clothes, jet-lagged and shell-shocked, looking at these two people who claimed to love me, plotting to strip away everything I'd built for myself. "I need time to think," I managed to say, backing toward the stairs. "I can't. I need time." "Don't take too long," Lorraine called after me. "Eric deserves an answer." I made it to our bedroom before the tears started, but they weren't sad tears. They were angry ones. As I sat on the edge of our bed, still clutching those papers, something shifted inside me. They thought they could force me to choose? Fine, but they weren't going to like the choice I made. I pulled out my phone and opened my messages to Mia. "You won't believe what just happened. Can I crash at your place tonight?" Mia's spare bedroom became my sanctuary that night. I sat cross-legged on her guest bed, surrounded by takeout containers while she paced the room, her creative director energy in full force as she processed my story. "So let me get this straight," she said, gesturing with a spring roll. "They ambushed you with divorce papers because you're too successful? According to them, it's about stability." I stabbed at my pad thai. "Eric says he wants a real wife." "Oh, honey." Mia sat beside me. "What are you going to do?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Eric's face appeared on the screen. I'd been dodging his calls all evening, but something made me answer this time. "Where are you?" His voice was tight. "Mother's worried sick." I almost laughed. "Mother's worried?" "I'm the one who came home to an intervention." "Just come home. We can talk about this rationally." "Rationally?" The word tasted bitter. "Like how you rationally waited until I was out of the country to plan this with your mother? That's not fair. I've been trying to talk to you about this for months." "No, you've been dropping hints about how my work isn't serious enough. There's a difference." Silence stretched between us. "Then, I got a promotion." "What?" "Senior partner. They announced it while you were gone. It means more responsibility, more stability. We could finally start that family mothers always." "Stop." My hand tightened around the phone. "Just stop. This isn't about your promotion or your mother's wants. This is about control. Don't be dramatic, Avery. I'm trying to build a future for us." "No, you're trying to build the future you and your mother want." "Did you even watch any of my Italy videos?" More silence. Of course he hadn't. I have to go, I said. I'm working on editing my new content. See? This is exactly what I mean. You're always working on your little videos instead of. I hung up. Mia watched me carefully. You okay? I need my laptop. I was already pulling it out of my bag. Remember that amazing grandmother I met in Tuscany? The one who taught me her family's secret pasta recipe. Yeah? I'm posting that video tonight. Not next week like I planned. My fingers flew over the keyboard. With a special dedication. Avery. Mia's voice held a warning note. To all the women who were told their dreams weren't practical enough. I typed in the description. And to those who tried to clip their wings. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. The video had gone viral overnight, with comments pouring in from women sharing their own stories of being pressured to give up their passions for someone else's comfort. Then came the text from Eric. My colleague saw your video. Was that really necessary? I was crafting a response when another message appeared, this one from Lorraine. You're embarrassing this family. Eric deserves better than your childish attention-seeking. My hands shook as I typed back. Family? You mean the one trying to force me to choose between my identity and your approval? We're trying to help you grow up, she replied. One day you'll thank us. I screenshot the exchange and sent it to Mia with the caption, watch me grow up and away from this toxicity. Later that afternoon, I sat in my favorite coffee shop, editing my next video when Jackson, my mentor in the vlogging world, slid into the seat across from me. Saw your Tuscany piece, he said, pushing a fresh latte toward me. Powerful stuff. You okay? Getting there. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. Did you know they had those papers ready before I even left for Italy? Jackson's eyebrows shot up. That's cold. Yeah. I took a sip of coffee. But you know what's colder? I just checked our joint account. Eric moved most of our savings to his personal account while I was gone too. Jesus. Jackson leaned back. What are you going to do? I opened my laptop, showing him the draft of my next video, a behind-the-scenes look at how I built my brand from scratch. I'm going to remind them that they're not the only ones who know how to plan ahead. The coffee shop's window reflected my smile, and for the first time since coming home, it didn't feel forced. They wanted to play hardball? Game on. I never meant to find the emails. I'd only logged into our shared computer to download some backup footage when a notification popped up from Eric's account. Usually I'd ignore it, but the subject line caught my eye. Concerns about Avery. My hands hovered over the keyboard. This was wrong. This was invasion of privacy. This was exactly what I needed to do. The email chain between Eric and his mother went back months. Before Italy. Before the ultimatum. Before everything. She's becoming more distant, Eric had written 3 months ago. Every time she leaves for these trips, she comes back different. More independent. Less willing to listen to reason. Lorraine's response made my stomach turn. That's why we need to act now, dear. Before she completely loses sight of her real responsibilities. I've spoken with Sarah at the firm. There's still an opening in the marketing department if we can convince her to give up this internet fantasy. They'd planned it all. The job. The intervention. Everything. They'd even discussed ways to make my vlogging more difficult, accidentally deleting footage, scheduling family events during my editing time. Guilt-tripping me about travel expenses despite my channel's revenue. I was still staring at the screen when my phone buzzed. Eric. Coming home tonight? His voice was carefully neutral. Mother's making her pot roast. Actually, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm meeting with my lawyer. Silence. Then, lawyer. Yes, to discuss the interesting emails I just found. The ones about sabotaging my career. You went through my emails? His voice rose. That's private. Private like plotting with your mother to destroy my business? Private like arranging a job for me without my knowledge. We were trying to help you. Help me. I laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. By going behind my back? By treating me like a child who can't make her own decisions. You're being irrational. No, I'm being crystal clear. For the first time in our marriage, I'm seeing everything perfectly. I took a deep breath. I'm sending you a link to my latest video. You should watch it. Mother too. I hung up before he could respond and opened my editing software. The footage I'd been saving for next week would work perfectly for today instead. I'd filmed it in a tiny restaurant in Rome, interviewing a female chef who'd fought her entire family to follow her culinary dreams. 3 hours later, the video went live, breaking free when family doesn't mean support. In the description, I included screenshots of select emails, carefully edited to protect private information, but clear enough to show the manipulation. My phone exploded immediately. First came Lorraine's text, "Take that down immediately or you'll regret it." Then Eric, "You've gone too far." Mother's crying. Finally, a message from an unknown number, "Saw your video. I'm a producer with Travel Network. Let's talk." I screenshotted the producer's message and sent it to both Eric and Lorraine with one line. "Funny how my internet fantasy keeps proving you wrong." Mia called moments later. "Girl, you're trending. Have you seen the comments?" I hadn't. I opened the video and felt tears well up as I read them. Hundreds of women sharing similar stories of family members trying to clip their wings, of partners who couldn't handle their success, of mothers-in-law who saw independence as a threat. I never wanted this fight, I told Mia. I just wanted to share the world with people. Sometimes the biggest fights find us when we're just trying to be ourselves, she replied. You coming to the studio tomorrow? Jackson's offering to help you film a follow-up. I glanced at the divorce papers still sitting in my bag, then at the producer's message on my phone. Yeah, I'll be there. I think it's time to show them exactly what happens when you try to cage someone who was born to fly. My laptop pinged with another email notification, Lorraine again, probably with more threats or guilt trips. I closed the browser without reading it. They'd had months to scheme and plot against me. Now it was my turn to write the story, and this time, I was making sure it had a different ending. The meeting with the Travel Network producer went better than I could have dreamed. Sitting in Jackson's studio, I stared at the contract in front of me, my hands shaking slightly as I read through the terms. They want to do a whole series? Mia paced behind me, practically vibrating with excitement. About women breaking free from traditional expectations around the world? 6 episodes to start, I confirmed, still processing it myself. Each featuring a different country and different stories of women who chose their dreams over society's demands. Jackson leaned against his editing desk. This is huge, Avery. Like, life-changing huge. My phone buzzed. Eric again. I'd been dodging his calls since the email expose, but this time I answered. What? Mother's in the hospital. My heart stuttered. What happened? Anxiety attack. After your little stunt with those emails went viral, her church group started asking questions. She couldn't handle the shame. The guilt hit hard, exactly as he intended. That's not fair, Eric. Fair? Was it fair to expose private family matters to the world? To humiliate us both for some internet fame? I looked at the contract on the table, then at my friends watching with concern. No. What wasn't fair was you two plotting behind my back to destroy my career. What wasn't fair was, she's asking for you, he interrupted. Says she needs to explain something. Something about her own mother. I caught Mia's eye, saw her subtle head shake of warning. I can't. I have a meeting. More important than family? You lost the right to play the family card when you chose your mother's happiness over your wife's. Silence stretched between us. Then, I saw the video. The one about the chef in Rome. You actually watched it? Yes. His voice softened. She reminded me of you. Passionate. Determined. A pause. Scared of disappointing everyone. My throat tightened. I'm not scared anymore. I know. That's what terrifies me. After we hung up, I stared at my phone until Jackson cleared his throat. You okay? They're trying to pull me back in, I said. Using guilt, using family, using everything they know about me. What are you going to do? I picked up the contract. I'm going to sign this. Then I'm going to visit my mother-in-law. Avery, Mia started, but I cut her off. Not because they guilt-tripped me, but because I need her to see something. An hour later, I walked into Lorraine's hospital room, laptop under my arm. She looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in the hospital gown. Eric wasn't there. Probably at work, keeping up appearances. Come to finish what you started? Her voice was weak, but still carried that edge. No, I set up my laptop. I came to show you something. I pulled up the rough cut of my next video, interviews with my followers sharing their stories of breaking free. Women who started businesses in their 50s, who went back to school after divorce, who traveled the world solo after years of being told they couldn't. These are the lives you wanted to prevent, I said quietly. These are the dreams you tried to crush because they scared you. You don't understand. But I do, because they told me about the Lorraines in their lives too. The women who tried to keep them small because they never got the chance to be big themselves. Her face crumpled. My mother didn't let you pursue art school. I know. Eric told me once. Tears slid down her cheeks. I was trying to protect you from disappointment. No, I closed the laptop. You were trying to protect yourself from regret. But it's not too late, Lorraine. Not for either of us. I left the contract on her bedside table as I walked out. Let her see what her daughter-in-law was capable of. Let her understand what she'd tried to stop. My phone buzzed with a text from the producer. When can you start filming? I smiled as I typed back. How soon do you need me? Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone's world. Sometimes it's about building your own so magnificently that they have to watch from the sidelines, knowing they tried to stop it from existing. The dinner was my idea. One last attempt at reconciliation, I told myself, though deep down I knew it was more about proving something. I'd spent the afternoon cooking a traditional Italian feast, recreating recipes I'd learned in Tuscany. The same recipes that had helped launch my channel's success. Eric arrived first, wearing the careful expression of a man walking into a minefield. Smells good. Thanks. I kept my focus on plating the osso buco. Your mother here yet? She's parking. Avery. He stepped closer. About the hospital visit. The doorbell cut him off. Lorraine swept in, designer handbag clutched like a shield. Well, isn't this quaint? I'd set the dining room table with my best dishes, candles flickering against the growing darkness outside. The travel network contract sat beside my plate and signed, but impossible to ignore. I made everything from scratch, I said, serving the food, including the recipes I learned from that grandmother in Florence. The one whose video you both refused to watch. Lorraine picked up her fork with practiced elegance. Dear, about that contract. Let's eat first, Eric interrupted. Can we just have one normal family dinner? Normal. The word tasted bitter. Like the normal life you planned for me behind my back? Avery, Lorraine's voice carried that familiar warning tone. We've apologized. What more do you want? Apologized? I set down my wine glass harder than intended. You had an anxiety attack and played the victim. Eric blamed me for humiliating you. Neither of you has actually apologized. Because there's nothing to apologize for, Eric snapped. We were trying to help you. Help me. I pulled out my phone, opening my analytics app. My channel has over 1 million subscribers now. The video about that Roman chef? It paid for this dinner. The series about breaking free from toxic expectations? It's funding my lawyer. Lorraine's fork clattered against her plate. Lawyer, did you think I wouldn't fight back? I turned to Eric. Did you really believe I'd just give up everything I've built because you and your mother decided it wasn't proper enough? We decided? Eric laughed, but it wasn't kind. You decided years ago that your internet fame was more important than our marriage. Internet fame? I stood up, hands shaking. I built a business. I created something meaningful. While you two were plotting to cage me in some corporate job, I was helping other women find their voice. And what about my voice? Eric stood too. What about what I wanted? What you wanted? I gestured at Lorraine. Or what she wanted for you. Don't you dare, Lorraine started, but I cut her off. No, I'm done being polite. I'm done pretending this is about family or stability or whatever excuse you're using this week. This is about control. This is about you being so scared of change that you'd rather destroy your son's marriage than let him be happy with someone who doesn't fit your mold. The silence that followed felt like glass about to shatter. Then Lorraine reached for her bag, pulling out a familiar document. The contract I'd left at the hospital. You want to know what I think about your success? She ripped the contract in half. I watched the pieces flutter to the table, something breaking and reforming inside me. Thank you. Thank you. Eric looked confused. Yes. I walked to my office, returning with another copy of the contract, this one already signed. Thank you for finally showing me who you really are. Both of you. What does that mean? Lorraine's voice wavered. It means I start filming next week. In Paris. I picked up the torn contract pieces. And when I get back, I won't be coming home. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. Avery, wait. Eric reached for me, but I stepped back. I made tiramisu for dessert, I said, gathering my keys and phone. Enjoy it. Consider it a parting gift, proof that sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living well. I walked out of my house for the last time, leaving them with their cold osso buco and shattered expectations. In my car, I texted Mia, "It's done. Can you help me pack tomorrow?" Her response was immediate. "Proud of you. Wine and boxes are ready whenever you are." I started the engine, watching the dining room lights through the window. Sometimes you have to burn bridges to stop yourself from crossing them again. The morning I planned to leave for Paris, I woke up to find my YouTube channel gone. Not just a video or two, the entire channel had vanished. 5 years of work, over 1 million subscribers, everything that proved I wasn't just playing at success, disappeared overnight. My hands shook as I called Jackson. "Someone hacked me. Everything's gone." "I'm on it," he said. "But Avery, there's more. Check your email." The Travel Network's message was brief, due to concerns about recent controversies and channel instability. "We regret to inform you that we must withdraw our offer." My phone buzzed with a text from Eric, "Mother knows people in television. Maybe now you'll understand what real stability means." I sat on Mia's guest bed, surrounded by half-packed boxes, trying to breathe. They'd finally done it. They'd found a way to clip my wings. "We can fight this," Mia said, pacing the room. "Jackson knows cybersecurity people. We can prove." "Prove what?" My voice cracked. "That my mother-in-law has connections? That my husband's firm probably handled the network's accounts? They made it look legitimate. Clean." My phone kept buzzing. Followers asking what happened. Collaborators wondering about planned projects. Each notification felt like another brick in the wall they were building around me. Then came Lorraine's call. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Ready to be reasonable?" Her voice dripped with false concern. "Eric's willing to forget all this unpleasantness. The marketing position is still open. Did you enjoy it?" My voice was eerily calm. "Destroying something I built just because you couldn't control it? Oh, darling. We saved you from yourself. From this fantasy world you'd created. Real life isn't about gallivanting around the globe, pretending to be something you're not. The only pretending I did was trying to be the daughter-in-law you wanted. Come home, Avery. Stop this foolishness." I ended the call and turned to Mia. "I need your camera." "What?" "Your camera. And help me set up my phone to record." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "They can take down your channel, but they can't stop me from starting over." I was already pulling out my laptop. "Call Jackson. Tell him to bring his equipment. We're doing this live." An hour later, we had a makeshift studio set up in Mia's living room. 3 cameras, proper lighting, and a determination I hadn't felt since my first video. Going live in 3, 2. Jackson gave me the signal. "Hi, I'm Avery Quinn, and this isn't my usual setup." This morning, I woke up to find my channel deleted. 5 years of work, gone. Why? Because I refused to give up my dreams to fit someone else's idea of success. My hands were steady now as I looked directly into the camera. "To my mother-in-law, who thinks she's teaching me a lesson about stability, thank you. You've taught me that true stability comes from within, not from following someone else's rules. To my soon-to-be ex-husband, who chose control over love, thank you. You've shown me that sometimes losing everything is the first step to gaining something better. And to everyone watching, this is what starting over looks like. This is what they don't tell you about following your dreams. Sometimes people will try to stop you. Sometimes they'll succeed. But they can never take away your voice unless you let them." The viewer count kept climbing. Comments flooded in. Stories of similar experiences, offers of help, messages of support. Then came a comment that made my blood freeze. "Lying about your family for views? Pathetic. Hope you're ready for legal consequences." Eric's law firm's official account. I stared at the threat, feeling the walls close in again. They could destroy my career, my reputation, everything I'd built. They had the resources, the connections, the power. But as I looked at the growing support in the comments, at Mia and Jackson standing firmly beside me, I realized something. They could take away my platform, but they couldn't take away my story. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't fighting back, it's refusing to be silenced. I looked back at the camera, straightened my shoulders, and smiled. So, who wants to hear about a little cafe in Paris I'll be visiting next week? The viewer count hit 100,000 and kept climbing. The Netflix email arrived 3 months into my Paris stay. Not just an offer, a full series deal. 6 episodes, international production, complete creative control. Everything Eric and Lorraine had tried to destroy was rising from the ashes, stronger than before. I hadn't expected them to show up at my Paris apartment. But there they were, standing in my doorway like ghosts from a life I'd left behind. "Impressive view," Lorraine said, pushing past me into the sunlit space. "The firm's been following your recovery with interest." Eric lingered by the door, looking uncomfortable in his tailored suit. "We saw the Netflix announcement. Did you?" I kept my voice neutral, though my hands itched to grab my phone and start recording. Funny how life works out sometimes. "Darling," Lorraine settled onto my couch like she owned it. "We've been thinking. Perhaps we were hasty in our approach." "Hasty?" I laughed, the sound echoing off the Parisian walls. "You destroyed my channel. Threatened me with legal action. Tried to force me into submission. And look how well you've landed on your feet." She smiled, all teeth. "Thanks to our motivation. Mother," Eric warned, but she waved him off. "The family name still carries weight," she continued. "We could help with the Netflix project. Open doors. Make introductions." I walked to my window, looking out at the Eiffel Tower in the distance. "Why are you really here?" "The firm's struggling," Eric admitted quietly. "Your story. It resonated with people. Clients are asking questions about how we handled things. So this isn't about reconciliation," I turned back to them. "It's about damage control. It's about family," Lorraine insisted. "About putting the past behind us and moving forward. Together." My phone buzzed, a reminder about today's shoot. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was supposed to be filming a segment about women reclaiming their power. You know what the biggest lesson of all this has been? I moved to my filming setup, adjusting the camera. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones most afraid of your success. "What are you doing?" Eric stepped forward. "Creating content." I hit record. "Tell me, Lorraine, why did you really come to Paris? To support me? Or because your son's firm is bleeding clients after trying to silence a woman for choosing her career over conformity?" "Turn that off," she snapped, mask cracking. "No." I stood straighter. "You wanted to be part of my story? Here's your chance. Tell my viewers why you thought destroying someone's dreams was an acceptable form of family love." "This is ridiculous." Eric moved toward the camera, but I blocked him. "Touch my equipment and I'll add harassment to the documentary I'm making about toxic family dynamics. I'm sure Netflix will love that angle." Lorraine stood, composure finally shattering. "You ungrateful." "Grateful." I let my voice rise, knowing the camera caught every word. "For what? For teaching me that true family supports instead of suppresses? For showing me that success is the best revenge? Thank you, truly. I couldn't have built this new life without your attempts to destroy my old one." "Eric," Lorraine turned to her son, "are you going to let her speak to us this way?" But Eric was staring at me, really seeing me maybe for the first time. "You never needed our help, did you?" "No," I said softly. "I only needed you to believe in me. Both of you. But you couldn't handle a version of me that didn't fit your mold." "This isn't over." Lorraine grabbed her bag. "Actually, it is." I gestured to the door. "My crew will be here soon to film. Unless you'd like to stay and explain to them why you're here." They left without another word, but as the door closed, I heard Lorraine's sharp intake of breath. Through the window, I watched them hurry past the cafe where my camera crew was already setting up. I touched my phone, stopping the recording. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about letting people witness their own toxicity, perfectly framed and in focus. 1 year later, I stood in front of a packed auditorium in New York, preparing to screen the final episode of my Netflix series. The show had exceeded everyone's expectations, becoming a rallying cry for women fighting to define success on their own terms. Mia sat in the front row, beaming, while Jackson filmed from the side, probably for his own documentary about independent creators. The energy in the room crackled with anticipation. Then I saw her slip in through the back door. Lorraine, looking smaller somehow, clutching a familiar leather-bound notebook I recognized from her college days. The art portfolio she'd never shown anyone. I began my introduction. A year ago, I thought losing everything meant the end of my story. Instead, it was just the beginning. The lights dimmed, and the episode began to play. Afterward, during the Q&A, a young woman stood up. "What would you say to the people who tried to stop you?" Before I could answer, another voice cut through the crowd. Lorraine had made her way to the microphone. "I can answer that," she said, her voice wavering. "Because I was one of them." The room went silent. My heart pounded as she opened her portfolio, pulling out a yellowed piece of paper. 40 years ago, I got accepted to art school in Paris. Her hands shook. My mother tore up the acceptance letter. Said proper women don't abandon their families for foolish dreams. She looked directly at me. I became the very thing I hated because it was easier than admitting I was wrong. I gripped the podium, unsure whether this was another manipulation or something real. "The firm filed for bankruptcy last month," she continued. "Eric's starting over at a smaller company. He's happier, actually. Away from my influence." She managed a small smile. "Your success didn't destroy us, Avery. It freed us." After the event, I found her waiting by the exit, clutching her portfolio like a shield. "These are good," I said, glancing at the sketches she'd finally shared. "Really good." "I'm taking classes now," she admitted. "Local art studio. Baby steps." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know that your revenge wasn't just about proving us wrong. It was about proving that it's never too late to be right." She handed me an envelope. "I wrote this months ago, but never had the courage to send it." Later that night, in my hotel room, I opened her letter. Pages of confessions, regrets, and finally, understanding. The last line caught in my throat. "Thank you for showing me that the dreams we bury don't die. They just wait for someone brave enough to dig them up again." My phone buzzed with a text from Eric. "Saw your finale. You were right. About everything. I'm sorry it took losing you to find myself." I didn't respond, but I did open my laptop and start typing. "Dear followers, let me tell you a story about revenge. Not the kind that destroys, but the kind that rebuilds. The kind that shows others how to break free from their own cages." Mia called as I was finishing the post. "You okay?" That was intense with Lorraine. "Yeah," I looked out at the New York skyline. "You know what's funny? I spent so long trying to prove them wrong, I never considered that maybe what they needed was someone to prove it was okay to change. So what's next for the great Avery Quinn?" I smiled, thinking of Lorraine's art portfolio, Eric's new start, and my own journey. "I'm thinking of doing a series about late bloomers. People finding their passion after everyone told them it was too late. Revenge by inspiration?" Mia laughed. "Very you." "No," I corrected her, watching the sun set over the city. "Not revenge. Revolution. Sometimes the best endings aren't about winning or losing. They're about everyone finding their own path to freedom, even the ones who tried to clip your wings. Because in the end, the greatest victory isn't in proving others wrong. It's in proving to yourself that you were right all along."
Get out with your kids, old hag. The lover was standing in front of me, holding a 1-year-old child she had hidden away. I was dumbfounded by her condescending tone, but I replied, "Fine. Here's the divorce papers. But I'm leaving the 3 kids behind." "What?" "You take care of them. They are your kids, after all." "That's right, fulfill your responsibilities as a mother." Even my husband started to berate me. Frustrated by their selfish remarks, I inadvertently let out a deep sigh and said, "You're joking, right? Because these kids are." "What?" My words seemed to have caught them off guard. Now, it was my husband and his lover who stood with their mouths agape, staring at me in shock. Then, they made a foolish decision. Watching their shallow judgment, I sighed softly to myself. They didn't understand the gravity of the situation at all. Pitying them, I decided to contact someone. My name is Kate, and I'm 40 years old. Currently, I work from home and am actively seeking a spouse. I have devoted myself to my job since childhood to achieve my dreams. However, upon turning 40, I noticed that most of my friends were already married with children. Is this really okay? Once I started thinking about it, I couldn't stop. One day, I vented my frustrations mixed with sighs to a visitor at my home. The visitor, a work acquaintance and close friend who knew my personality well, replied with a wry smile. "Well, I can't say for sure, but getting married might open up a new world for you." The acquaintance was a work-related contact, but our long association had evolved into a sort of friendship, and she knew my personality well. Her casual remark made me pause in realization. Maybe it will open up a new world. Those words were intriguing to me because of my profession. Of course, I didn't take marriage lightly. I've heard plenty of complaints from married friends, and encountered negative information about marriage daily through articles and television. Yet, my curiosity became uncontrollable, and that very day, I registered on several dating apps. Though it may seem frivolous, I've always lived by following my inquisitive nature and applying it to my work. This time, too, I acted on impulse. Little did I know what the future held. Among the messages I received on the dating app, one from a man named Ben Thompson, a 45-year-old employee, stood out. His messages were very polite, and I quickly took a liking to him. We shared hobbies, and our conversation flourished around books. As we continued to exchange messages, and just when I felt things were going well, Ben invited me to meet for a meal. I promptly agreed. That weekend, we had our lunch date. Ben was just as calm and composed as his messages had suggested. His gentle manner and kind demeanor made me wonder why such a wonderful man had been single until now. Curious, I asked him, and he replied with a slight, apologetic smile. "Actually, I was once married and got a bit burned by the experience. Plus, work kept me so busy that I just got older without realizing it." Indeed, Ben was divorced, a fact noted on his profile page. Despite this, something about his photo had caught my eye. Perhaps it was intuition. After comparing many other men's profiles, none attracted me as much as Ben. Meeting him confirmed my instincts were right. I strongly felt I wanted to date Ben. Our meal was delightful, and we quickly made plans for another date. 2 months later, Ben proposed to me. I was thrilled and agreed to marry him quickly. While I wondered about the speed of our engagement, I rationalized that at our age, there was no point in delaying. Given our ages, I'm not too fussy about having a wedding ceremony. If that's what you want, I have no objections. Overcome by embarrassment, I almost skipped the wedding preparations and decided to move in with Ben immediately. I wanted to start our married life as soon as possible. Thus, I quickly handled all the necessary procedures and moved into Ben's house. But before that, Ben and I had this conversation. "Sorry, but could you handle this while you're running your errands?" He handed me a marriage registration form, already signed by him as the applicant and guarantor. "Understood. I'll submit it later." I took the documents, but with all the moving and paperwork, I forgot to submit them. As I planned to do it later, sudden work emergencies piled up. And I completely forgot about it until after I had moved into his house. Realizing this, I thought to myself, I must not forget to submit it later as I walked into his house. That's when something unbelievable happened. For the first time, I discovered that Ben had children. During the 2 months we dated, I had never been invited to his house. At the time, I thought nothing of it, but now it seemed there was a reason. And it was a bit of a shock. As I stood there dazed, Ben suddenly spoke in a stern voice. "Ah, yes. From now on, you'll also be taking care of the kids. Don't slack off." His tone had changed from before as he ordered me around. As I exclaimed, "What?" 3 young boys came bustling out from the back of the house. "Huh, so this is the new mom?" "What? No way, she's just the maid, right?" "Come on, Alex, that's harsh to say right off the bat to someone you just met." The 3 of them stared rudely at me and burst out laughing noisily. As I stood there, taken aback, Ben cleared his throat loudly. "Hey, cut it out, all of you." Upon his stern reprimand, the 3 boys chorused a belated okay. "These are my sons." From oldest to youngest, Chris is 18, Alex is 17, and Justin is 16. All are in high school, and Chris is a college applicant. Make sure you take good care of them. Saying this, Ben mentioned he was going to take a bath and left the room. I stood there for a while, dumbfounded, staring at the 3 boys. Then, they began to sneer and make belittling remarks again. "What's with that stupid look, old hag? Yeah, don't just stand there. We're hungry. Hurry up and get dinner ready, maid." With that, they each retreated to their rooms. I was left alone at the entrance, standing in disbelief. So much had happened all at once, and I couldn't keep up. I had been busy all day and was utterly exhausted. Glancing at my watch, I saw it was now 7 p.m. I finally entered the house and headed for the kitchen. Though told to make dinner without any guidance. It was my first time here and I didn't know where anything was. Sighing, I peeked inside the refrigerator only to find a few drinks and some condiments. How was I supposed to prepare a meal with this? Then, Ben, fresh from his bath, saw me standing lost in the kitchen and clicked his tongue in irritation. "You're slow. Never mind, I'll order takeout for today. Don't bother cooking." "I'm sorry." As I apologized, hanging my head, he clicked his tongue loudly again and snapped. "Make sure you do your job properly tomorrow." He then stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind him. His cold demeanor left me wanting to cry and also filled me with a strong sense of suspicion. Silently, I began to formulate a plan. That day, although Ben mentioned he'd order takeout, he only ordered for himself and his sons, not for me. The 4 of them sat around the dining table, enjoying their hamburgers, while I could only watch from the kitchen corner. Noticing my gaze, Ben spitefully remarked, "That's your punishment for not making dinner. Go eat some ready-made food from the store." Hearing this, I bowed my head and left the house. There was a convenience store nearby, I remembered as I trudged off to buy my dinner. When I returned with my ready-made meal, Ben and his sons had already finished their dinner and returned to their rooms. The remains of their takeout hamburgers were left untouched on the kitchen table. I sighed as I cleaned up and ate my bland dinner alone. I hadn't expected such treatment on my first day. Perhaps this marriage was a mistake. Despite wanting to flee, I reconsidered. My married life had just begun. Maybe if we lived together long enough, we could become a real family. With this hopeful thought, I decided to try harder starting tomorrow. However, such resolutions were quickly shattered. The three sons were all selfish, treating me more like a servant than family. "Hey, where's my gym uniform? I told you to wash it yesterday. You always forget, so useless. And my uniform shirt is still wrinkly, seriously annoying." Saying that, the three of them berated me daily and hurled insults. Initially, they refused to let me enter their rooms. Ben's house was fairly large, with many rooms, and each child had their own. When I first came to the house and tried to clean their rooms, the three of them found out later and were furious, shouting at me. "Don't just come in here. Yeah, you're so annoying. You didn't take any of our stuff, did you?" Frightened by their accusations, I no longer dared approach their rooms. They would leave their laundry scattered, sometimes forgetting to include items for washing, and then blame me when things were amiss. Unable to endure it any longer, I consulted Ben, but he dismissed me. "I'm busy. Don't bring such trivial issues to me." After moving in, he had dumped all household and child-related responsibilities on me. Suddenly, his overtime and business trips increased, and he was rarely home on weekends. Moreover, both he and his sons seemed to view my home-based work as nothing more than a hobby, openly disparaging it. "How long do you plan to continue with such nonsense?" Whenever I was at my computer, Ben would sneer and sigh exaggeratedly, suggesting I was just playing around. His lack of empathy deeply hurt me. "Please don't speak to me like that. Actually, I'm going to be quite busy with work soon. Could you help out a bit with the household chores?" One day, when I desperately needed time for work, I asked him this. He exploded in anger. "Work? The work you're doing is hardly significant. Focus on getting the housework done perfectly. If you can't manage that, then quit your job." His ferocity left me speechless. I had explained my work to Ben before our marriage, and he had agreed I could continue it. He even promised to share household duties when work got busy. Yet now, he was completely negating his earlier assurances. Feeling deceived, I was left hollow. From then on, I resolved not to discuss work anymore. Until our living situation stabilized, I would focus on the household, thinking that would be best. Besides household chores, there was something else that needed my attention. It was about the three kids. On the surface, they seemed like model students, but I soon realized they were quite troubled. At school, they behaved without any issues, but at home, they invited bad company and engaged in problematic behavior. What started as hidden drinking and smoking a few months ago had now become blatant in front of me. They would disguise themselves to go out at night, continuing their habits of smoking and drinking. Concerned by their actions, I rushed to consult Ben, but he chose to believe the children over me. After all, the children committed their misdeeds when Ben was not at home, and he easily believed their side of the story. Then he coldly said to me, "How can you say such demeaning things about your own children? I find your character, willing to falsely accuse them so easily, unbelievable." Ben's outright dismissal left me speechless, and seeing such a father. The children casually joined him in calling me terrible. "Dad, she was slacking off with the housework yesterday too." "Yeah, she seems to have been on the computer all day until we came back. The cleaning isn't done properly either. We can't concentrate on our studies like this." Then my husband scolded me fiercely, being continuously blamed by both my husband and the children. I gradually lost my place in the home. Amidst this, I faced even further misfortune. Taking advantage of their father's trust, the sons not only looked down on me but also started pinning their own misdeeds on me. And they reported this to Ben. "Hey, Dad. She was stealing money from your wallet." "What? Is that true? There's no way I would do that." I desperately denied the accusation, but the children, smirking, didn't listen to my explanations. In the end, under the coercion of Ben and the children, I had to pay a substantial amount of money as compensation to avoid further punishment. This was how I was terribly treated by Ben and his 3 sons, enduring in silence. However, my silence was not out of resignation but to bide my time, waiting for the right moment to strike back. Although my feelings for them had nearly vanished, running away from this house would leave a bad taste in many ways. One day, about a year into the marriage, I noticed that among the friends hanging out with the sons, there was one who was always treated like a servant. Whenever he came to our house, he was always sent to the nearby store to buy drinks and snacks. That day, I quietly followed him as he was about to leave the house. "Hey, you don't need to go buy anything. I've got some drinks and snacks prepared for you." When I spoke to him, he seemed relieved and stopped going to the convenience store. He thanked me politely and introduced himself. His name was Fred Johnson. He was a classmate of Justin's since their freshman year of high school. "Things were good at first," Fred said softly. According to him, the boys hadn't always been this way. But their behavior escalated around the time the oldest was preparing for college entrance exams. Eventually, the sons began targeting Fred. He really wanted to stop hanging out with them but couldn't seem to get away. That's why he was relieved when I approached him. A month later, he confided something important to me, and I offered to help him discreetly. While I was dealing with the sons' issues behind the scenes, a change occurred between Ben and me. A month after I started consulting with Fred, a woman suddenly appeared at my doorstep with a baby. She bluntly said to me, "Hello, ma'am. My name is Emma Brown, and this child is Ben's. I'll be straightforward. Could you divorce Ben?" As I stood there stunned by this sudden revelation, she impatiently made a derogatory remark. "Get out with your kids, old hag." Then Ben, who arrived late, agreed with his lover, pressing me to divorce. "I'm sick of living with an old woman like you." I was disgusted by their condescending remarks and replied, "Fine, I'll leave as you say. But I'm leaving the 3 kids behind." "What? You take care of them. They are your kids, after all." "That's right, fulfill your responsibilities as a mother." I let out a deep sigh in response to their selfishness and said, "You're joking, right? Because these kids aren't mine. Besides, I'm not even married to Ben." "What?" My words apparently shocked Ben as he stared at me, his mouth agape. "Yes, I never submitted the marriage registration Ben told me to. On the day it was revealed he had hidden his children from me and pretended we were married, I harbored a strong distrust towards him. I decided to see how things would unfold and refrained from registering our marriage. While opinions may vary, I continued to hide this fact and maintained a marital relationship with Ben for a specific purpose. So, I don't need to take care of the kids. I firmly stated this and announced my departure from the house. Initially stunned, Ben soon smirked unpleasantly, and his lover laughed loudly. "What?" Then we're even spared the hassle of a divorce and property division. Watching their shallow reaction, I sighed silently to myself. They foolishly understood nothing of the situation's gravity. While pitying them, I contacted Fred, the friend of the son, to inform him of something important. 2 weeks after I left Ben's house, his lover came to see me, her face distorted with anger. "Hey, you! You deceitful woman! You knew those kids were terrible troublemakers, didn't you? You wicked woman!" She nearly lunged at me as she screamed these accusations. Yes, Ben had told his lover that the children were model students, and she had naively believed him. But in reality, they were far from it. "You knew they only acted like model students in front of Ben, didn't you?" She pressed me, demanding that I take the kids back. But I coldly told her, "This has nothing to do with me. Besides, they're causing even more serious trouble now." At my words, the lover burst into loud sobs. "I can't handle it anymore. Help me." With a sigh, I offered her some advice. "If you dislike it so much, why not just break up with Ben?" "But I don't want that either." She stomped her feet like a petulant child. "You dislike this and that, but that doesn't solve anything." I sighed again, exasperated. I closed the door on the lover who rejected all my suggestions, leaving her crying outside. Eventually, she quieted down. 2 weeks later, a book was released and became an explosive hit. It spread through word of mouth online, drawing significant attention. The story resembled my experiences with my husband and his lover. Indeed, the book was a novel I had written, based on my marriage to Ben. I am a romance novelist with a bit of a reputation in the field. My venture into a gritty drama of love and hate had caused quite a stir for its new style. I used social media to promote it heavily, sparking a major debate. Your new work is being highly praised as a fresh frontier. After some time, the acquaintance who had once told me that marriage might open up a new world came to visit, smiling broadly. Indeed, she was actually the editor responsible for my work. She knew my personality well, so perhaps she had anticipated this turn of events back then. If that was the case, it might seem a bit cunning. But since I went along with it, I couldn't really complain. Well, in a sense, it's like a personal novel, so maybe it's not something to be proud of. As I sighed, my acquaintance smirked and handed me an envelope. I took it with a puzzled look, and she said cheerily, "But it did help someone, right?" Suddenly recalling something, I hastily opened the envelope and pulled out the contents, a letter from Fred Johnson, a former friend of the son's. I quickly read through it and felt a profound sense of accomplishment as I exhaled in relief. The letter explained that Fred had been freed from bullying. Indeed, at the same time my book was released, the criminal activities of the former children had been reported with evidence, thanks to Fred's carefully gathered proofs. This had led to the police detaining the boys. Because of the uproar, Ben also became a topic of gossip in the neighborhood. Many readers pointed out similarities to the novel and speculated online, quickly identifying personal details in today's digital age. It was terrifying how the novel's models were pinpointed to be Ben and his family, causing him to be whispered about by neighbors. Eventually, the boys were sent to a juvenile facility due to the severity of their actions. But their poor attitudes apparently led to them being bullied there. Ben ultimately lost his job due to the scandal spreading to his company, finding himself without a place. When the lover found out Ben was unemployed, she took the child and fled. It turned out her attachment to Ben had been more about his income than love. She was reportedly struggling to raise the child alone, working in a night job. Ben, unable to find regular employment due to the scandal, resorted to day labor. This marriage experience allowed me to write novels from a different perspective. Though it might seem like I used my marriage to gain experience, I reconciled it with myself as acceptable. Though my time with Ben and his children was short, it seemed to have significantly grown me as a person. There might be others who suffer through worse marriages without being able to express their pain. I decided to focus on such people in my future novels. And with this experience, I aim to reach new heights as a writer, continuing to write works influenced by what I've gone through. Having set a new goal, I am now diligently working on a new piece at my computer.